Hello and welcome to the Startup and Career Show, your destination for inspirational stories and real life experiences of startup founders, corporate leaders, and authors. I'm your host, Rushabh, in conversation with a guest for today, Dr. Ajai Chowdhry, co founder of HCL, also known as the father of Indian hardware. As a director at Indian Angel Network, he continues to guide the startup ecosystem in the country and advises the Indian semiconductor mission. In his book, Ajay talks about his journey of several decades and shares tons of practical insights for everyone to imbibe upon. A very warm welcome, Ajay. Glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Rishabh.
So, Ajay, when everyone was chasing jobs, especially the government jobs, you founded HCL along with Shiv Nadar and others. And startup was not even a buzzword back then. So, can you share your journey of building HCL in those days? How was it like?
Well, as you can imagine, it was very tough because number one, there was no concept of angels or VCs those days. And therefore, funding was really not available. Secondly, nobody knew what a startup was. So they felt that this some chota people are starting something. Who knows what will happen? So that was the environment. And the most important part was that when we started in 75, uh, there was emergency. So in the country. So it's not that the environment was fantastic, but it didn't really matter to us. We said, okay, we are determined to start something we're going to start. The microprocessor had just made its appearance in the world. And we felt that if we take the microprocessor, we could really change the world. Those were our dreams then. So what we wanted to do was to make a computer, manufacture it in India, and create the computer market. By that time, there were just 100 computers in India. So when we got started, the challenge was that there was no, for you to actually manufacture anything in the country, you needed a license from the government. Now, we were a startup and the government was not really open to giving licenses to small companies at all. If you were a big company, it was much easier for you to get a license. So when we left DCM to start, we said, okay, let's do something. We started a little marketing company and we just had 1.8 lakhs among all six of us. And we said, let's just create some cash flow for ourselves. So we went to a company called Televista, got their calculators and started marketing them in the country. And that's how our journey started by creating more funds till the time we could actually get a license. 4 or 5 months went by and then we were not really getting anywhere. And suddenly we discovered that the UP government was sitting with a license for computers. So we happened to go and meet them and we talked to them and said, look, we've just left from DCM. We have created the electronics business for DCM and we would like to partner with you where we take your license and form a joint sector company. So it took a while, but good news is that they really accepted that fact. And so soon enough, we formed a joint sector company. And interestingly, we named the company appropriately at that time. Naming was very critical. So we called it Hindustan Computers Limited. Now, when you actually look at the name, it looks big, although we were a startup. But that gave us the benefit of entering into a lot of customers. And that's how our journey started with a joint sector company. They owned 26%, we owned the balance. Getting money was tough. And in the initial stages, we approached the chairman of Syndicate Bank. They gave us a very small amount of funding for bills receivable, which was around 15 odd lakhs. And then when we got the joint sector going, we were able to get funding from the UP government itself. So that's how our journey started. And it was a very tough time because, as I said, you needed licenses, you needed money, you needed everything, and there was nothing available. But we just managed. And so I've always had this belief, and this is something later on I was taught by my guru, Dr. C.K. Prahlad. And he always used to say, A is greater than R. So if you have the aspiration, resources will happen. And that's how our journey started.
Wow, that's pretty interesting because when I read the book, you know, aspiration is greater than resources, and I think very well explained there as well. But Ajay, the fact is, you were a startup and reaching out to a UP government entity, right? And it's not just about having a license that they had, but the problem is, uh, in those days when LinkedIn, Google, this social media was not there. Just to find out this piece of information would have become a humongous task. So how did you manage to connect with this government entity to begin with?
It was sheer luck. Somebody told us about it, and then we actually reached out, and it sort of worked out.
Wow.
So
But
luck does play a role.
hmm, interesting. But Ajay, you spoke about aspiration, right? And especially, if you have aspiration, resources will happen. And you apparently learned this from CK Prahlad. So can you explain for the benefit of our viewers, that how is it that you go about it? Because it's people often say that, okay, I aspire to be something, but I don't have resources. So you are actually challenging the whole convention in that sense. So if you can just elaborate a bit on that.
Well, I've met a lot of startups who have an idea and they always keep saying that, look, how do I get money? How do I get people, etc., etc. And I always tell them that, look, if you have a good business plan and you are able to convince your initial investors, like, look, every startup starts with their own money. You have to have that 1.8 lakh equivalent. Today, it's maybe 5 to 10 lakhs. So what people typically do is that they go to friends and family and that get themselves bootstrapped, get going. And only when they have the first few customers based on their idea, do angels start to invest. So that kind of a risk you have to take. And you should have the conviction that your idea is good, your team is good, and you will make it happen. At that time of starting, you might have left a phenomenal job, which is what I did, or you might have just started after college. It's a risk that you take because, look, when you're young, you can afford to take more risks. I was just 25.
Wow. Wow. But, Ajay, going through your journey all these years, you've been a fine salesman, salesperson all these years. But often young founders struggle with gaining first set of customers. And I read in your book that you started selling computers even when it was not ready. So can you share
Right.
some insights from your journey of what did you do differently back then?
Well, actually, it's all a concept that I learned in DCM. DCM, they used to teach us that there is something called transactional analysis. And what does transaction analysis mean is that you actually position your customer in 2 or 3 different ways. So let us say you walk into an engineering institute. Then when you meet the professor there, you treat him like your professor and you become a student. So that's what the transaction is all about. You're really looking up to him as a professor and you appeal to him to say, look, I'm a young engineer. I've just started this company. My product is getting ready. It's still in the labs, but we believe that we can do it and we want your support. And that's how you earn your initial business. And our first product was an engineering product, engineering computer. So we used to go to professors and researchers and go and appeal to them and say, look, guys, you started sometime. You had nothing. Now you're a professor. Here we are starting out. Trust us. We'll create. This is the background of all of us. We have a joint sector company. The joint sector company name itself got us a lot of entry points because moment you said Hindustan Computers and under that we used to write a joint sector undertaking of UP government, it gave us a lot of credibility. And we built on that credibility and our own personal sales capability and our backgrounds, we built upon that. And at that time, DCM was the 5th largest company in the country. And we went to them and said, look, guys, we have left DCM. We learned a lot in DCM and we know what we are doing. So we can assure you that we will be able to deliver what we promise. And so some of them said, look, okay, we are willing to take a risk, but look, you have to deliver by 31st of March next year. So we said, yes, we will deliver 31st of March. And it so happens that our product was designed, manufactured, and ready on 27th, 28th of March, if I recall.
Wow.
And product, I was in Madras then. I had gone and sold 6 computers to IIT Madras. I got a message on 25th to say product is reaching 27th. I personally took my car to the airport, loaded the 6 computers, brought them to IIT Madras, and personally delivered them to the professors. And they were thrilled because we met our commitment. But look, if we had not delivered by 31st March, there would be no HCL.
True. True. So I think in the initial period, I think that is also very important that you have to fulfill those deadlines. You just can't take it for granted.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
But Ajay, you also mentioned in this book about selling the product as a solution to a problem by focusing on its benefits and not just the attributes. So can you please elaborate a little on this? Because I believe, do you think that people falter in these areas?
Some of them do understand and some of them don't. Typically what happens is when you're selling a very fancy, high-end electronic product, you tend to say so many bits, so many bytes, so much memory, so much this, so much that. You get carried away with the innards of the product. But what does it, when you go to a customer, that's not what he or she is looking for. They are looking for a solution. So when you go to a customer, your basic objective should be, what is the need of the customer? And based on the need, you actually create a strategy to meet that need. So for example, when we were actually initially selling the computer, we were going to small and medium enterprises or engineering institutes. So small and medium enterprises, they had never even seen a computer. So they had no idea what a computer would do for them. So we had to actually sell the whole concept that, look, you can do your payroll on the computer, you can do your sales and invoicing, you can do your inventory, you can do your receivables. All this information will be available to you at the press of a button. So you started like that. And then you actually sat there and told them, okay, let's look at your inventory, let's look at your receivables. And by using a computer, how much you can reduce that. So we used to actually have an ROI calculator that we had created for our salespeople. So they would go there, sit with the customer, figure out what their needs are, figure out how to give them return on investment. So we would actually tell them, okay, in a year and a half or 2 years, you will recover the cost of the computer. So, but remember one thing, at that time, the cost of our computer was 18 times the cost of an ambassador car. So it was very expensive, but we still sold it. And in 10 years of our starting in 76, we were #1 computer company in India.
Wow, this is big.
Yeah.
But Dr. Ajay, path of salesmanship is never easy, and in fact, you actually share a couple of anecdotes in your book as well, where you talk about instances where you had suddenly increased the price, to the customer because you were on the verge of losing the deal, and you said, "I'll increase the cost by 10%." And there were other instances that you had reduced the price in order to get the deal. So can you share some of the strategies that, as a salesperson, how did you develop these effective ones and ensuring that you get a closer to the deal? Because many people are unable to close the deal. The conversation happens, it stays there.
You see, I remember reading a book on salesmanship in the early days of my career. And in that book, there was a page on which there were little blocks. There were about 20 odd blocks. And the salesman goes to the manager and says, I went and asked for the order, I didn't get it. And in every box, he says the same. The last box says that I went and asked for the order and I still didn't get it. So the manager says, keep asking till you get it. So the biggest challenge that salespeople face is that they do everything right, but they never ask for the order at the right time. So asking is very important. If you don't ask, you don't get. So that's part one. Part two is that you must know how a process of sale is going to be in every customer's account. So you need to know the background of the prospect, whom then you study very carefully and decide how it will all work. Will it go from desk to desk, or will it go to his boss for a final decision? You should know all that. So if you know all that, then you get to be well prepared for the final, closure of the case. The closure strategies are many, many. I've described some of them in my book, but like, for example, one closure strategy is called presumptive selling, presumptive close. Presumptive close is like this, that you actually sit across the table, everything has been discussed, the customer has looked at all competition, you are well placed, but he's still not, he's sitting on the edge and not deciding. So you just go to him and say, okay, Mr. Customer, when do you want the delivery? Now you are asking for a delivery when he's not yet given an order. It's called presumptive selling. Okay, so those are the kind of questions you ask, so that, okay, what will be the location you want to deliver? How many computers do you want? Which cities would you like us to deliver? You start asking these kind of questions. Actually, he's not yet decided, but you're still asking presumptive close type questions. So that's one of the strategies. The other strategy is that, like, for example, when I increased the price for the product, we just went and told them that, look, our global partners increased all its prices, but we are offering you the same price till yesterday. But today the price is gone up by 10%. So the customer was shocked. He said, but no, yesterday you told us this. Say, okay, we'll give you the same price, but you place the order right now. That's how it gets closed.
Interesting.
So these are all strategies you develop on the spot. You got to be very smart. You need to understand the environment very carefully, and then be able to take a decision on the spot to be able to close. But closure is something that you must work on. And salesmanship is not that you're born with. Salesmanship can be learned, and it's all a science. If you follow the process of selling, you can succeed.
Interesting. So Ajay, in fact, while I was going through the book, there was a very important lesson that you spoke about, and that is about taking timely decisions and not sitting on those decisions. Because see, what happens is many times founders are afraid that whatever decisions turns out to be a bad one. So can you share your perspective on effective decision making?
See, this is something that I learned from one of the people I visited in the United States. He was the CEO of a very, very interesting startup. He had just started this business 3 years ago. And he told me that I take all my decisions very quickly. So I said, but what happens? I mean, don't think it through. He said, yeah, I do think it through, but I do not sit on a decision. So I said, then what happens? He says, out of 10 decisions, maybe 3 are not right. 7 are right. I correct the 3 that are not right. But at least I've taken 7 on time. So I think that's a message that I got from him. And I always followed that through. I never sat on any decisions unnecessarily. Yes, if it was to be discussed with a team member and they had a different view, I had a different view, we would sort it out. But at the end of the day, we would take a decision. And we would not unnecessarily lose an opportunity.
In fact, because I read a very nice adage in the book as well, where you say that HCL gave more importance to guts than even brain power. And you need guts to take quick decisions, right? I mean, it's like a chicken.
Yeah, actually, that's right. Because unless you see, at the end of the day, I call it polishing the apple. Okay, so you take up apple, you keep polishing. You polish it so much that the skin comes off. Now the skin is the best part of the apple. That's really what I call it, taking decisions on time. Don't keep polishing the apple. Take the decision, get going, and then you'll be able to be successful. So I think that's what it's all about.
True. And also you also talk about being responsiveness in business communication. And if you can share throw some light on this specific part, because do you think people drop the ball somewhere because of being unresponsive?
You see, a lot of the times you will have customer complaints, right? A customer has complained. Typically, the customer might write to a regional manager or somebody, and he gets frustrated because there has not been any response. So he or she will then reach out to the CEO, and I would get that mail. Now, moment I got a letter like that, those days it was letters, later on it became mail, you needed to take care of that complaint immediately. And that's something that we learned, and we used to call it complaint is a gift. Okay. So every complaint that came in, if we handle it well on time, we actually found that the same customer ordered more equipment on us later on. And that's how complaint becomes a gift. So responding is very important. I noticed that people have very poor email, what I call proper way of handling emails. They tend to sit on an email and not respond for many, many days. Because they think I'm so big, I'm the CEO, it doesn't matter, I can respond 20 days later. But that's really where you go wrong. You must have the etiquette to be able to respond immediately to any email that you receive. And that gets a lot of brownie points with the people that you've actually written the mail to.
Interesting. I think these are some very practical, suggestions that you're sharing. In the book, you also talk about abandoning the safety net mentality. So can you also that aspect?
You see, a lot of people tend to take a decision thinking that, let's be safe. Okay. Now you go to a circus. I don't know how many people have seen circuses these days, but in a circus, there is something called trapeze. In trapeze, you actually catch hold of things, then you jump from one to the other. And under that, there is a net. That's the safety net. So what happens is that if you remove that safety net, then you will take decisions by which you have to take the right decision and do the right thing, because if you don't do that, you'll fall down and there'll be no safety. So I actually learned this lesson from a case study that I did on a company called Intuit. Intuit actually created a home software for homekeepers, for wives at home, and they could keep their accounts on it. So, but they realized very early days that if you create a software which has bugs, the housewife will not be able to handle the software. So they said, we'll remove the safety net. We will not charge even 1 rupee for maintenance of the software. So people who were actually making the software made sure that there were no bugs in the software. And that's how safety net was removed. And that's how they were so successful.
Wow, this is interesting. But Ajay, when HCL started, it started as a hardware company, right? And when you faced challenges during your US expansion, over a period of time, HCL then pivoted to software. So can you talk about this transition phase as well and your learnings from this? Because if you had a ready business setup after taking all those challenges, doing well on the hardware side of things, and then you changed course.
So it's not that we totally pivoted, but we slightly did, because what we did was that we had borrowed some money from ICICI Bank, and we decided to set up our manufacturing plant for hardware in America. Now, can you imagine coal to Newcastle? That's exactly what we were doing. But it was based on a suggestion that McKinsey had given us. So we went there, we set up a hardware manufacturing plant. We got business also. We got lots of orders, but we could not supply because McKinsey had forgotten to tell us that there are certain conditions for selling in America. And we were not meeting those environmental conditions in our hardware. So even though we had good orders, we could not supply. So what do? You borrowed so much money from a bank, you've set up everything, and you can't make any sales. So what we did was that we said, okay, we have one great capability. That capability was in the operating system that we had written. And that operating system was very popular those days. It's called Unix. It had appeared in the marketplace for commercial computers about 3-4 years ago. And we were far ahead of the rest of the world in the Unix area. So what we did was that we started placing our engineers who knew Unix into R&D labs of hardware companies. So we went to Hewlett-Packard, they took 20 people. We went to another company, they took 10 people. That's how our software business started. Software in India originally was what was called body shopping. I don't like the word body shopping, Basically, it was placing engineers in people's labs and offices, and they were working for them, and we were getting paid for it. So that's how we started our software business. And then it sort of grew. And over a period of time, we separated the two businesses. And the hardware business was called HCL Infosystems, and the software business was called HCL Technologies. It was called Technologies because we were doing very technical engineering R&D type of work. And that's how we started our software business.
Wow, that's a very interesting journey, so to speak. But Ajay, HCL used to extensively work with Nokia as well, and it had a market share of 70% in India, and they lost that dominant position. And you were privy to all those situations. So if you can just share some of those factors according to you and your learnings, that what is it that led to the downfall of such a big company?
Well, we literally brought Nokia to India, and that time they had pretty much 0% market share. And we initially 5-6 years was very tough because the cost of the phone was so high, and the environment in the country was very difficult for you to sell phones. So what we did was, as a strategy, is that we formed an association, and that association is alive today also. It was called the Indian Cellular Association, ICA. We were the founders of that. And what we did was that we used that platform to go and convince the government to change the rules of the game. See, the first rule that we got changed was that calling party pays was the concept those days. So if you were a caller to anybody, you used to pay for the call, which was ridiculous. So we went and convinced the government that that's a ridiculous state of affairs. Please change this. So that's the first thing that we did. And then we changed the many rules like that. And we got the duties reduced on the product. And when the environment started to open up, that's when we really expanded the business. But those days, the model of sales all over the world for phones was that you took the phone, you went to a Airtel or a Vodafone or any of them and said, please take my phone and sell it along with your service. That was the model. So the telecom operators used to sell the phones. We said, okay, if we continue to do that, we are going to be stuck with the growth of the telecom operator. So we took a slightly different approach. We said, okay, we talked to Nokia. Nokia was very open to looking at the whole idea. And we created the concept which we call the FMCG model of selling phones. Just the way soaps are sold by levers, we said we'll sell phones like that. So we actually appointed close to 90 resellers all over the country who knew retail outlets, and they had money because they were already handling large business like levers or Godrej or Dabur. So we picked up those guys and said, you will sell our phones, we will create the market. Nokia was ready to create the market. We created a distribution which was brilliant, and we were no longer dependent on the telecom operators, and that created the market. And then the pricing was something that we worked with Nokia, and they agreed to correct the prices as we went along. And at one stage, we were selling in a day more than what we used to sell in 5-6 months.
Wow.
And we started looking at the model very differently. So our salespeople were given daily targets. And I used to call it the ODI model of selling, because just like in one day internationals, you had a run rate for the day. So everybody had a run rate for the day. And they had to report every evening how much they sold. That really created a tremendous amount of peer pressure and got the numbers going. And in about 5 to 7 years, we were 70% market share. But then what happens? Market changed. Multiple operators came in. Each of those operators were offering free SIMs for their new services. So everybody started to look at multiple SIM products. Nokia didn't have it. Some local companies like Micromax were smart enough. They created multi SIM products. They also created products that were, having larger battery life. So all these people started to attack the market of Nokia. All other competitors followed suit. they came up with multi-SIM products. Nokia didn't have it. Secondly, Nokia stuck to its own operating system, and all others were working on Android. So these two factors, the Android problem and the multi-SIM problem, is what led to the downfall of Nokia. I even met the chairman of Nokia and said, in HCL Technologies, we'll design and make a phone for you, which is multi-SIM Android operating system. You just have to label it Nokia. But they were in that thinking, not invented here syndrome. And they didn't want to take that risk. So the whole market got lost.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Ajay, for sharing these, because this is a very important perspective, that founders and students, especially who listen to this conversation later, that they need to remember that in business, there is no time to be complacent. And this is the classic case.
Absolutely right. You must be proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah. And on that, you have a very nice conversation where you relate to a cricketing field, right? Where a bowler is a proactive person and a batsman is a reactive person for setting up the field.
Yeah. You ask anybody, would you like to bowl or bat? Everybody says bat. And to me, that's the wrong thing to say. You should be actually willing to bowl because you can set the field. And setting the field in a sales situation is very important.
Absolutely. And Ajay, since you mentor so many startups and, just wanted to understand that as per your understanding, why is it that so many people wind up, these many companies? Is it lack of clarity that you see, or is it inadequate execution part that creates the problems?
Actually, sometimes startups start to feel that their product is more important than the market. So they lose touch with the market, what the market needs. The second part where they really fail is that they don't understand business. So I think the most important part in the beginning of a startup is to understand that you need to create a team which has all the right ingredients for making the business successful. So you need to have somebody in the team who can do actual sales. You need to have somebody in the team who can take care of accounting and finance. And you have to have a CEO who can actually make sure, or a CEO who can make sure of operations. So all of these are important. Most times, technology-based startups, they spend so much time on creating the product that they forget the rest. You need to have all these 3-4 ingredients in place. And you need to make sure that you have a very sound business plan and you're able to implement on a monthly basis. And you need to make sure that you're doing that very extremely well. So it's basically initially it's a lot about passion, creating a company is a lot about passion, but as you grow, you need to have both passion and process.
True. Absolutely. But Ajay, you being a pioneer in shaping India's electronics policy, and you had predicted that electronics import could become one of the biggest outlay that country will have to face. And you've been advocating for self-sufficiency in electronics as well. Now that things are falling into place, so can you share how is India gearing up for becoming the so-called electronics hub of the world?
Well, actually, I've been at it for more than 30 odd years. So the message that I want to give to people is that you have to have focus and you have to have patience. You need to be, if you want to be successful. So I've been very focused on making electronics happen from many, many years. And many governments came and went. I've still worked on it and created it. And finally, an electronics policy got created, which was based on the recommendations that were made by a group of us who had created the task force. And then slowly, the government clearly started realizing that the imports were rising and they need to create an industry where we could actually manufacture and design products. So in the last 4 to 5 years, PLI, which is called the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, all these came up for electronics. And that has helped create India as a scale country. So we are manufacturing in large volume today. There are many, many electronic manufacturing services companies who have moved to India and are making products here. There are Indian companies who have also become what are called EMS companies. So a lot of that is happening. But my concern in the last 1 or 2 years has been that we are making products in India, but we're not adding value in India. So we need to do more than what we are doing. So that's how I went and set up a foundation of my own, which I called EPIC. And under this EPIC Foundation, which is whose full form is Electronic Product Innovation Consortium, our whole objective is to recreate electronic brands in India. And if we want to be successful, we need to design and make in India, not just manufacture. And today, geopolitically, China is placed in a situation where people don't trust China anymore. So they want an alternative. Till yesterday, the only alternative was that from China, they moved to Vietnam or they went to Thailand or any of these countries. But these countries have manufacturing capability, but they don't have design capability. That's how India can differentiate. So now my theme, and this is my dream for the next few years, which I talk about in the last chapter of my book, is to make India a hardware product nation. I want to make sure that we go and occupy 20% or 30% of what China does today and design in India and make in India. So I think that is what is essential to make India a global hub for electronics. Just manufacturing alone will not do it. And there's another very large opportunity that is sitting for us. We have many, many people in this country who can repair products. Okay. And there are many organizations that teach how to repair. But all products that are imported into the country today are not repairable. You take a phone or you take an iPad or any of these, you can't even open them. So now, as a strategy, I'm working with the government to create a policy which is called right to repair.
Wow.
And we want to make sure that every product that is sold in India is repairable. So number one, it will reduce e-waste. You see, this typical Western way of thinking that you can buy and throw is not correct for India. India, we don't even throw our toothbrush. Yeah. So why should we throw away a phone or an iPad? So what we are pushing is that everybody who markets their products or makes products in India should be repairable. So we've actually, for an example, created a tablet product in India. We've got it designed recently from a design company in India, and it's fully upgradable and repairable. So you can open it, you can increase memory, you can change the battery, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. So the life of the product gets extended, and you don't need to unnecessarily throw it and create e-waste. So I think these are the kind of thoughts that we need to create for a country like India and Africa, Middle East, where people don't have this philosophy of buy and throw.
True.
I mean, you look at all products, they are made like that today. Designed to fail, as I call it. We want to make products which are designed to last.
Wow. I mean, amazing, Dr. Ajay, because these are big things and your energy level is really inspiring, and I think the work, that effort that you've put in. The interesting thing is, I think yours is a classic case of perseverance, because it's not just about from a career standpoint. What I could figure it out was that you were at the government knocking on their doors for almost 30 years for getting things into perspective, right?
And I'm still at it.
And you're still at it. Wow.
I'm not going to give up.
This is awesome, Ajay. I think it was wonderful speaking to you. Thank you for taking out time today and having this conversation. Lovely having you here, sir.
Thank you. Sure. Bye-bye.
To all our listeners, thank you guys for joining us. Do read this book, Just Aspire. And remember, aspiration is always greater than the resources. Go for it, guys. Goodbye. Signing off for now.
Thank you.